Councillor Kroetsch, is it your intent to speak to the motion at present?
It is. So I'll ask Legislative Coordinator Gauthier to put it up on the screen so it can be both seen publicly and preserved for the record, because this is, although it's wordy, a little bit last minute. And I'm not going to read all the whereas statements out because those will appear before you and it can be read later. If you wouldn't mind making that a little bit bigger, Elsie, from the, yeah, that's the place. You got it. The plussy area. Keep going. Yeah. And so I'll read out the therefore be it resolved clauses, and these will address items 1, 3, 4, and 5 from the list that Christine read, but not 2. And I think we have a discussion about 2 needs to happen in terms of what can be done in the shorter term in terms of 2023. I prepared this with the understanding that we'd have a bit of a framework around what would the implementation look like, right? So what would that be? I didn't contemplate in advance of this meeting what also we could do in the very, very short term in terms of implementation. Maybe there's a chance to walk away from that, come back to council and add something with respect to number 2. I don't know if we can do that today in terms of our preparedness, but therefore be it resolved that that staff, and the whereas clauses just to say the things we've all been saying here today. Nothing will shock you from those. They're addressing the many issues that delegates brought up in those whereas clauses. The staff in the Licensing and Bylaws Services Division be directed to prepare an information report for Q4 2023, so for this year, identifying the 2024 priorities and timelines for the development of new bylaws, including adequate temperature bylaw, and report back to the Planning Committee. And so that's a change there. That's the place where that should be reported back to. So I think I'd originally have my motion as Public Health, but Planning is the place. That the following staffing resources and related costs to expand licensing and bylaw services, specifically those are to be referred to the 2024 tax supported operating budget process, 1 new manager FTE, 1 senior manager FTE with the licensing and bylaw division, 1 new municipal law enforcement supervisor FTE, and 1 new municipal law enforcement officer FTE, and a half FTE for legal services to support the licensing and bylaw services division. So this is just outlining the scope of work required to be able to implement an adequate temperature bylaw. And this would come to the 2024 budget process to be voted on there. This is what the point of this is, to prepare that for the process. So we're kind of doing it in 2 steps. Get this all ready so we can vote on this as part of the budget. And similarly, C is similar, right? That we have a budget of $100,000 to, as part of the 2024 tax supported capital budget, to undertake research, community engagement, and leverage external expertise for the development of this bylaw. And this is in line with what we heard recently when we talked about rent evictions bylaws. What bylaws this division is saying is, look, we just don't have the capacity. I'll speak to that at the end. The last 2 I just added were D and E, and those are to respond to, I think, items 3, 4, and 5, which are that staff in healthy and safe communities be directed to report back to the Emergency and Community Services Committee on the feasibility of the development of a municipal program to support low-income tenants with the cost to run an air conditioning unit and to support retrofits of private purpose-built rental housing in Q4 of 2023. So they'll be coming back to Emergency and Community Services with that feasibility. And the discussion is going to be around the different kinds of thresholds and programs we already have. So if we have an OW and ODSP program, how does that work interrelate to that? What do we need to be doing there? And E, and this goes to Councillor Beatty's points mostly, the staff in healthy and safe communities and public health be directed to report back to the Public Health Committee on the feasibility of tracking heat-related deaths and illnesses in Hamilton in Q4 2023. And the reason I put those departments together is because, of course, one of those oversees stuff like fire and other kinds of things, and those, the police and other kinds of things, and has a relationship there, and then one has a public health component. So clearly those folks need to work together to be able to support that data. So, one thing we're hearing a lot of, and I'm going to acknowledge that right here publicly, is that we haven't necessarily built up what I consider to be a future-leaning capacity in our municipal law enforcement to support these kinds of services. So we've prepared, as part of our budgeting over the last several decades, a department that can meet the needs as we currently have them defined with our service level. But there's not a team there that's ready to expand that department, go out there, implement, enforce, write bylaws, as these issues keep emerging, right? And so they're going to continue to emerge when we start defining multiple overlapping emergencies. An emergency is, by nature, something that requires immediate attention and something that is very serious. So we need to make sure that we're addressing these issues. And that's what this is trying to acknowledge, that as quickly as humanly possible, we want to get this implemented. I don't have an answer for 2 at this point, and we'll leave it for now. My seconder is Councillor Tammy Huang for this motion. I should have said that at the beginning. I apologize. And so I'll leave it there for now. I have nothing else to say in terms of motivating the motion, but certainly other questions about what can be done for summer 2023.
Thank you. Councillor Clark on the motion.
Yes, please. I'm hoping you will give me a little bit of latitude, because I don't generally provide a long preamble to a question, but this one is warranted. If we did not have the current heat emergency bylaw in place, can Dr. Richardson explain or address the impacts of dehydration on human bodies with regard to cognitive abilities? And where I'm going with this, I've heard many anecdotes about more violence when it's really hot. People, especially in long-term care homes, being much more forgetful when it's really hot and they're not drinking the right amounts of water. And I've seen that personally on sport fields where someone has dropped and they're dehydrated and they're almost incoherent. So could Dr. Richardson explain what happens if people are not properly hydrated in what we're talking about, full heat emergencies?
Dr. Richardson.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think the impacts that Councillor Clark is speaking to go beyond hydration. I think they're also just direct effects of heat on the human body, so direct physiologic effects. And you've heard many of those outlined today, everything from dizziness to feeling unwell, nausea, to going on to full heat stroke and collapse related to it as well. You've got the effects of dehydration, which can accentuate other underlying chronic illnesses and all of those things, which is why our seniors are more vulnerable. Those with chronic diseases are more vulnerable to the impacts of heat. And indeed, there is literature, as Matt outlines, there is literature relating to violence as well, that in terms of people's behavior during heat events. So the impacts are there, they're well documented, and are definitely reasons why we look at extreme heat events and the heat warnings that we do.
And the reason I asked that is because I was contemplating this motion and contemplating where we were prior to the heat emergency bylaw that we currently have, and what would the impact be to our community. So when we're addressing residents who are low income, or they're living in an apartment building, especially the high rises, the temperature in those buildings go up dramatically in a heat event, especially if you don't have air conditioning. It doesn't matter how many fans you have, been there, done that, you can't cool down that room, and you can't lay in the bathtub all day in that cool water to help you understand, that feels better. So I think there is merit to this motion. I do have to do the balance in my mind, and I think we all do around the table in terms of costing. So I'm glad that it's been referred to that budget process so that we can have a better understanding on that. But I would like to address what can we do now? I get the timing is an issue in terms of an overall bylaw, but what can we do now in terms of ensuring that, for example, there are wellness checks? It's nice to ask your neighbors to check on your neighbors, but I've got some neighbors who wouldn't even cross the road to check on their neighbor. They don't want to talk to them. We need to have something available to residents now, especially if they're concerned about mom and dad and they want to check on them. What can the city do in that regard? And more impactful, I'd like to have a better understanding as to what Ontario Works does and what they can do now during a heat event. So if I could have answers to those questions, let's start with Ontario Works, I think would be appropriate.
Thank you. Who is available? Oh, I see. If I could, I see Erica Brimley.
Correct.
Are you able to speak to
Yes.
that, please? Councillor
Yes.
Clark's question?
Through the chair, Erica Brimley, Human Services Manager. The Ontario Works program still would be offering or providing between June 1st and September 30th eligible participants with air conditioner funding if they are eligible, so that they're not negatively impacted from the heat. And that would be for Ontario Works and ODSP participants.
Thank you.
And may I ask a supplemental, can you clarify what does that mean? I'm not trying to be pedantic, but
No, that's
are
fine.
you providing an air conditioner? Do you provide offsets for electricity, or does Electra do that? I'd like to have a more fulsome explanation, so not for me particularly, but for residents in our community so they understand what's available for them.
Thank you.
Through the chair, the benefit would provide up to, or would provide $350 benefit paid directly to the applicant. They would use that to purchase an air conditioning unit, but it does not include any cost for installation or utilities.
And how do you verify that they're buying an air conditioner with that money?
We believe, based on the medical documentation that they are providing and the need that they have, that they are purchasing that benefit, as similar to other benefits that we issue through the Ontario Works program, paid directly to applicants.
Thank you. Councillor?
If a property manager, specifically high rises, because they do have concerns about air conditioning units falling out of buildings, there's nothing there that would pay for a certified electrician or HVAC person to install those units so that they're safely installed in an apartment building?
Through the chair, that is correct. We do not have provision to issue those type of funds. This funding is through the Ontario Works provincial funding that is capped per the ODSP caseloads.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Erica. Chair, I don't have further questions on this bylaw. I'm going to support the bylaw because I'd like to get that information back in terms of what we can create. I think it's vitally important, but subsequent to the discussion on the bylaw, I'd like an opportunity to ask staff some further questions in terms of what we're doing now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Councillor Alex Wilson. No? No? Okay, thank you. If I could ask Councillor Pauls just to take the chair. Actually, it's not specific to this bylaw. Like Councillor Clark, it would be outside it, so I'm good. Thank you. Okay, there's no further questions on this. And it's, the bylaw has been, or the motion has been duly moved and seconded. Carries 10-0. Thank you.